Hello there, welcome to Depths of Unknown. 60 million years ago, before your ancestors were anything more than small, frightened mammals scrambling through the underbrush of a world still recovering from catastrophe, before the first horse was the size of a dog and the first whale still had legs, before the grasslands existed, before the great ice ages, before any ecosystem you would recognize as natural today, there was a snake, not just any snake. A snake so massive, so completely dominant over everything that shared its world, that modern scientists who study it still struggle to find language adequate to describe what it actually was. A snake 13 meters long. A snake that weighed over 1,000 kilograms. A snake whose body at its widest point was broader than a grown man's shoulders, wide enough that if you bent one of its body rings into a circle, you could climb through it like a hoop. A snake that could kill and swallow a crocodilian the size of a modern saltwater crocodile without difficulty, without urgency, without anything resembling effort. A snake that was not merely the apex predator of its environment, it was the definition of danger in that world. Everything else that breathed in that ancient tropical jungle organized its survival around the existence of this one animal. We call it Titanoboa cerrejonensis. And this is its story, the story of the largest snake that has ever lived, the story of the world that made it possible, and the story of what it means that such a creature once existed on the same planet we now call home. To understand Titanoboa, you have to understand the world it lived in, because without that context the animal becomes almost incomprehensible. 60 million years ago, the Earth was deep in what paleoclimatologists call the Paleocene Epoch, a period of profound transformation in the immediate aftermath of the extinction event that ended the age of dinosaurs. The asteroid impact that occurred 66 million years ago had done something unprecedented. It had simultaneously killed off the dominant land animals, the dominant marine reptiles, the dominant flying creatures, and reset the biological clock of the entire planet in a single geological moment. 75% of all species were gone. The world that survived was a world of rubble, silence, and open ecological opportunity. And into that opportunity, the survivors, the small, the adaptable, the fortunate, began to expand, diversify, and fill every vacant niche with new forms of life. The climate of the Paleocene was nothing like today. There were no polar ice caps, no glaciers. The mean annual temperature in what is now northern South America, where Titanoboa lived, was somewhere between 30 and 34 degrees Celsius year-round, not seasonally. Permanently, this was a greenhouse world, a planet-wide heat bath driven by elevated atmospheric carbon dioxide, in which the tropics were dramatically hotter and wetter than anything existing on Earth today. The rainforests of the Paleocene were not like the Amazon or the Congo. They were older, denser, more extreme, a version of tropical forest that modern ecology has no living equivalent for, because the climate conditions that built them no longer exist anywhere on this planet, and that climate is the absolute key to everything about Titanoboa. Snakes are ectotherms. Their body temperature is entirely regulated by the temperature of their environment, and their metabolism, their growth rate, their maximum possible body size are all directly constrained by how warm their world is. A snake in a cold environment is small, slow, metabolically limited. A snake in the warmest, most energy-saturated tropical environment this planet has experienced in 60 million years is something categorically different. The Paleocene tropics removed the ceiling on what snake biology could achieve. In that world and that heat, a snake could grow to dimensions that evolution had never been able to reach before and has never reached since. Titanoboa was not a biological accident, it was an inevitability of physics. Given those temperatures, that density of prey, that abundance of thermal energy, something enormous was going to fill the apex predator niche. A snake filled it completely, permanently. For millions of years, the discovery of Titanoboa is one of the most dramatic paleontological stories of the 21st century. It begins in the Cerrejón coal mine of northern Colombia, the largest open-pit coal mine in the world, a vast industrial excavation cutting into the Guajira Peninsula for decades. Coal forms from compressed ancient plant material, and the coal seams of Cerrejon were laid down during the Paleocene Epoch in the floors of ancient tropical forests and river systems. The rock layers surrounding those coal seams contain the fossilized remains of everything that lived and died in that ancient world. In 2003, a team of paleontologists from the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute began systematic excavation at Cerrejon. What they found would change the scientific understanding of post-dinosaur life on Earth permanently. The first snake vertebrae was noticed by a graduate student named Jason Head, sorting through a collection of extracted fossils in a laboratory. A single large, unusual bone caught his attention. A piece clearly shaped like a snake vertebrae, but dramatically, impossibly larger than any snake vertebra he had ever seen in any collection anywhere. He measured it. He measured it again. He called colleagues. He showed them photographs. And the initial response of the scientific community was essentially unified disbelief. It cannot be a snake. Snakes do not get that large. There is no snake that size. The vertebra must belong to something else. But it was a snake vertebra, the neural spine, the pre-zygapophyses and post-zygapophyses, the unmistakable architecture of a snake's backbone, scaled up to a size no one had believed biologically possible. More vertebrae were found. Ribs were recovered. Enough material came together that a formal reconstruction became possible. And when the numbers were published in the journal Nature in 2009, the scientific world's response was disbelief, followed by slow, reluctant, astonished acceptance. Titanoboa cerrejonensis, length 12.8 meters, weight approximately 1,135 kilograms, the largest snake that has ever existed on land, by a margin so enormous that the second largest known fossil snake is nearly 3 meters shorter and hundreds of kilograms lighter. Let us make this physical, because numbers do not convey what Titanoboa actually was. The largest living snake today is the reticulated python, with verified specimens reaching approximately 6.5 meters. The green anaconda holds the mass record, with large females reaching perhaps 100 kilograms in exceptional cases. Titanoboa was nearly twice as long as the longest python ever recorded. It was 10 times heavier than the heaviest anaconda ever measured. Its skull, reconstructed from fossil material, was roughly the size of a large watermelon. Its body directly behind the head, the thickest point of the animal, was approximately the circumference of a 55-gallon industrial drum. When Titanoboa moved through its world, it did not slither in the way we typically imagine snakes moving. It moved the way a river moves, with a slow, continuous, inexorable mass displacement that covered ground with terrifying efficiency and required nothing as theatrical as speed. Speed was irrelevant when you were the largest thing in the water. The world Titanoboa inhabited at Cerrejon was a complex, rich, and extraordinarily productive ecosystem that the fossil record is still revealing to us. The coal mine has produced not just Titanoboa, but giant turtles with shells nearly 2 meters long, massive crocodilians that were themselves formidable predators, primitive lungfish, and an extraordinary diversity of plant material that reconstructs the structure of the ancient forest in remarkable detail. The picture is of a dense, steaming, river-dominated tropical landscape, not unlike a superheated version of the modern Amazon, populated entirely by animals with no living equivalents. And ruling all of it, from the dark water of every major river system, was Titanoboa. The animal was primarily aquatic or semi-aquatic. This conclusion comes from multiple lines of evidence. The sheer mass of the creature makes sustained movement on land energetically brutal. On the ground, its own weight creates mechanical constraints that water largely eliminates through buoyancy. The geological context of the Cerrejon Formation is a river delta and floodplain system, and Titanoboa's fossils appear consistently in association with aquatic fauna. The analogy with the modern green anaconda is instructive. The largest living constrictor is also the most aquatic living constrictor, and this is not coincidence. Water gives a massive snake efficiency of movement, concealment in ambush, and access to the densest concentrations of large prey. For Titanoboa, the rivers of the Paleocene were not just habitat, they were the weapon. Modern research has fundamentally revised what we thought we understood about how giant constrictors kill. For decades, the assumption was suffocation. The snake squeezes until the prey cannot breathe. This is wrong. Constriction kills through circulatory arrest. The pressure a large constrictor exerts against a prey animal's body is sufficient to prevent the heart from pumping. The cardiovascular system is physically overwhelmed, blood cannot circulate, and the prey animal loses consciousness within seconds rather than the minutes that suffocation would require. For a snake the mass of Titanoboa, the constricting force available was something no animal in its ecosystem had any evolutionary defense against. A 4-meter crocodilian seized by Titanoboa would have been unconscious in under 30 seconds, not from lack of air, from the simple physical impossibility of its heart continuing to beat against that pressure. The thermal biology of Titanoboa gave scientists something they had not anticipated when the fossil was first described: a direct measurement of ancient climate. The relationship between body size in snakes and the environmental temperature required to sustain that body size is well established in living species. By applying the known equations backward from Titanoboa's reconstructed mass, researchers calculated the minimum mean annual temperature required to support an animal of its dimensions. The answer was between 30 and 34 degrees Celsius, significantly warmer than the modern tropics. This was not merely a fact about one extinct snake, it was an independent confirmation of Paleocene tropical temperatures derived from a completely different line of evidence than any previously used. Titanoboa became, unexpectedly and elegantly, a biological thermometer for an ancient world, a snake that told us precisely how hot the Earth had been 60 million years before anyone was around to measure it. Now, let us actually go there. Close your eyes for a moment and try to stand in the Paleocene. The temperature is 32 degrees, and it has been 32 degrees every day of every year for longer than any concept of time you possess. The forest is overwhelming, not just dense but dimensional, layered, steaming, alive with a biological intensity that has no modern parallel. Ferns the size of trees, flowers that are evolutionary experiments. A river wide and dark and slow in front of you, its surface the color of ancient tea, its banks thick with vegetation that crowds to the waterline. Everything here is large. The turtles on the bank are larger than coffee tables. The crocodilian watching you from the far bank is 5 meters long, and it is not the thing you should be afraid of. The thing you should be afraid of is in the river. The thing you should be afraid of is the river, because a section of the water, a 30-foot section, is beginning to resolve from the general opacity of the current into something with shape and with intention. A head emerges, not explosively, not dramatically. Titanoboa had no need for drama. It was already the most dangerous thing in this world, and it had known this for every day of its life. The head breaks the surface slowly. Water streams from scales, each one larger than your open hand. The eyes are small, fixed, ancient. Fixed on the crocodilian across the bank that has not yet understood what is approaching. By the time it does understand, the coils are already in motion, and then it is over. In the specific and total stillness that follows when one participant in a conflict was never in any danger at all, Titanoboa vanished from the fossil record approximately 58 million years ago. The reason is straightforward in geological terms and significant in every other sense. The climate cooled, gradually, inexorably. The extreme warmth of the Paleocene thermal maximum declined as the atmospheric conditions that had produced it shifted. As temperatures dropped, the metabolic mathematics that had made 1,000 kilograms snake body size advantageous inverted. The energy cost of maintaining such a body in a cooling world exceeded the energy available to sustain it. Smaller snakes, more thermally flexible, better suited to a world where reliable extreme heat could no longer be taken for granted, survived. The giants died. The great snake shrank across generations, across species, across millions of years, until all that remained were the largest snakes of the modern world: the reticulated python, the green anaconda, the rock python, which are genuinely impressive animals but which are, compared to Titanoboa, like the echo of a sound that has long since stopped. There is something that Titanoboa tells us about the nature of biological possibility that is worth sitting with. This animal was not primitive. It was not a crude early attempt at predator design that evolution would later improve upon. It was the perfect biological solution to the specific physical conditions of its world, as precisely engineered by natural selection, as completely optimized for its environment, as any creature that has ever drawn breath on this planet. The fact that it no longer exists is not evidence of inadequacy. It is evidence of how completely the world changed around it. Titanoboa was built for a specific Earth. That Earth is gone. The snake went with it, but the stone of a Colombian coal mine held the record of it for 60 million years. Patient as only geology can be patient, waiting for the moment when a curious human hand would brush the ancient dust aside and bring back into the light of a different and smaller world, the evidence of something that had been magnificent beyond any easy accounting. We live in an age that is very comfortable with the idea of large things from the past. We know the dinosaurs existed. We know mammoths existed. We accept the scale of ancient life as a general intellectual proposition. But Titanoboa forces something more specific than that general comfort. It forces you to confront the fact that the scale of biological possibility on this planet is not fixed. It is not a constant. It is a function of temperature, of atmospheric chemistry, of the specific configuration of carbon and sunlight and heat that characterizes any given geological moment. The rules that currently govern what is possible for a living snake, for a living animal of any kind, are the rules of our specific climate. They are not the rules of all climates. They were not the rules 60 million years ago. Titanoboa is the proof of that. 13 meters of it, preserved in Colombian stone, a measurement of a world that once was, and a reminder that the boundaries of what is possible are always, in the end, a product of the world that is doing the producing. 60 million years ago, in a hot and steaming river delta in what would eventually become Colombia, a snake moved through dark tropical water. It moved with the authority of something that has never needed to hurry, never needed to hide, never needed to be anything other than precisely what it was. It was the largest predator in its world. It was the culmination of millions of years of evolution operating in the most thermally favorable conditions snake biology had ever encountered or would ever encounter again. It did not know it was temporary. It simply existed completely, fully, with the absolute and total authority of a creature that sits at the very top of the only world it has ever known. And then the world cooled, and Titanoboa was gone, and the stone closed over it. And 60 million years passed, and someone found the bone, and we remembered.